So what exactly is prompt engineering? Simply put, it's the practice of crafting inputs that guide AI systems to produce specific, useful, and strategically aligned outputs. Think of it as the difference between giving vague directions to an intern and giving a detailed briefing to a senior consultant. And you can imagine what the difference is in terms of the output that you're going to get back in both those scenarios. Hello, and welcome to the Health Tech Marketing Show. I'm your host, Adam Chirinas. Today is one of those episodes where I focus exclusively on AI. It's one of those AI quick take episodes. And we're going to focus on a topic called prompt engineering. It's a really important concept. You probably heard about it. You may have even read up about it. My goal today is to explain why it is particularly important, but more importantly, I'm going to give you some tips on how to really get the most out of prompt engineering. Before we get started, thank you to you for listening to this episode. And also a thank you to our presenting sponsors. So our longtime sponsor, HIMSS, who are the leader in advancing health equity and digital innovation, data-driven care through technology and community collaboration. You all know HIMSS, I'm sure. I also want to give a big thank you to our most recent sponsor, Healthcare Now. They are the 24/7 series of expert shows. They provide shows, interviews, and podcasts that can really help healthcare leaders with things like innovation, policy, strategy, and insights. And I'm really grateful to both of them for their support. Now, let's talk a bit about AI prompt engineering. I'm sure you've been using tools like ChatGPT and Claude and Perplexity for a while. And that's probably why you're here, right? You're trying to get the most out of those applications. If you feel like you're getting the outputs that you're getting are a little bit generic and maybe getting a bit stale, my goal today is to help you get the most out of these particular systems. And the reality is that, most people really use the AI engines kind of like they use Google. They're sort of, most people are using it like a glorified search engine. And I think a lot of people are kind of wowed by that. And that's just great. But if you're trying to use it in a professional context and you're trying to use it to get the most out of the full potential, there's a very important concept that you've got to get your head around. And that's the notion of prompt engineering. And this is a fundamental skill that if you master this, it's really going to transform the value that you get out of these applications. And so by the end of this episode, my goal is that you'll understand what prompt engineering is and how to use it to really transform the way that you use these tools to improve your marketing, your planning, sales enablement, content creation, however you're using it in a professional context. So what exactly is prompt engineering? Simply put, it's the practice of crafting inputs that guide AI systems to produce specific, useful, and strategically aligned outputs. Think of it as the difference between giving vague directions to an intern and giving a detailed briefing to a senior consultant. And you can imagine what the difference is in terms of the output that you're going to get back in both those scenarios. And I think it's important that you understand the reasons why it's important. And there are kind of 4 reasons in general. First of all is precision. So great prompts get you exactly what you need rather than generic approximations that sort of sound right, but don't quite hit the mark. Second reason is efficiency. So when you engineer your prompts effectively, you dramatically reduce the amount of editing that you're going to need to do. I've been surprised that when I really improve the prompts in creating content, for example, I have a lot less editing to do than when I'm a bit lazy with the prompts. The third thing is strategic alignment. So well-crafted prompts ensure that the outputs exactly match your objectives, your brand voice, instead of sounding like they just came out of Wikipedia. We've all kind of experienced that. There's a lot that you need to put in to make sure that what you get out of it gives you real value. And fourth is competitive advantage. And so this is the thing, is that most people are actually using AI quite poorly and they're satisfied with good enough outputs. But if you master prompts and you make it your part of your long-term learning objectives to improve the way that you prompt the AI tools, you're going to get a big step up compared to your competitors. The core principle here is simple. AI systems are incredibly capable, but they need context, they need constraints, and they need clear objectives. The more specific and strategic your input is, the more valuable your outputs are going to be. Let me give a quick example about what I mean. And so, something you might just put into ChatGPT or Claude is write about healthcare AI trends. That's fine, right? It's a harmless thing. It's something you might put into Google. But an engineered prompt sounds like this. As a marketing strategist, analyze the top 3 healthcare AI trends for 2025 that will impact purchasing decisions at health systems with 500 plus beds, focus on ROI implications, and provide specific talking points for engaging C-suite executives. I mean, the difference is pretty obvious, right? You're going to get a much, much better output with the second prompt than the first prompt. Now, let me break down the way to do this. And it's a framework that I've come to learn recently called the 5-layer framework. And these 5 layers are going to help you provide a structure for you in the way that you create your prompts so that you get to the level of precision that's going to be really valuable. So layer 1 is role and context. You need to define who the AI should be and provide relevant background. So don't just ask for generic advice. Position the AI as a consultant, an analyst, a copywriter, or a strategist with specific expertise. So for example, you're a B2B marketing consultant specializing in health tech companies who sell to large healthcare systems. All right. So that's tell the AI who you want them to be when they provide their response. Layer 2 is your specific objective. So what exactly do you want to achieve? And you need to be concrete about the deliverables and what success metrics look like. So instead of help me with lead generation, it's create a lead qualification framework that helps our sales teams identify high intent prospects within the first 5 minutes of a discovery call. A lot more precise, right? Layer 3 is about the audience and the use case that you're trying to get answers about, get help with. So who will consume this output and how will it be used? This is crucial because AI needs to understand the end application. So here's an example. This will be used by our sales development reps using discovery calls with IT directors at mid-size hospitals. Really specific, right? Layer 4 is format and constraints. So you want to be specific about the length, the structure, tone, and style. And you need to include any limitations, things like, those types of requirements. So for example, provide a 2-page framework with clear yes, no criteria, specific follow-up questions for each scenarios, and examples of qualifying versus disqualifying responses. So I think you can see how that builds on the previous layers that I've covered in layers 1 through 3. Layer 5 are about defining your success criteria. So how will you know if the output is actually good? And what does done well look like? So for example, success means our SDRs can qualify leads 50% faster, while maintaining or improving accuracy in identifying genuine opportunities. So let me read this out to you. You're a marketing operations consultant with deep experience in B2B health tech. Our company sells patient engagement software to health systems, and we're struggling with lead quality, particularly from our content marketing efforts. We're getting volume, but too many leads are going nowhere after initial contact. I want you to create a lead scoring model that helps us prioritize prospects based on engagement signals, company fit, and buying intent. The output should be a practical framework our marketing ops teams can implement in HubSpot within 2 weeks with clear point values and logic for each criteria. This will be used by both marketing to prioritize follow-up and sales so that their time is more focused on the highest potential opportunity. Success means reducing our time to qualification by 40% while improving our lead to opportunity conversion rates. So that, as you can tell, right, that prompt is going to generate something which is going to be really specific. And you're probably going to have a back and forth conversation with the AI to get to the answer, because it's what you're putting in there is going to generate questions that it's going to answer. But you can see, I mean, that is a lot of work that's gone into it. And actually, you know, one thing you might want to do if you need help creating this is actually have a back and forth with the AI to help me create the prompt. So your first session, if you like, with the AI is help me create a prompt to achieve these specific objectives. What do you need to know from me to do that? And then so by going back and forth, by having a conversation with them, you'll get to something more precise. And then you can then generate your response. Okay. So where content prompt engineering really shines is in a lot of different, you know, it is in many areas where you're really going to get value out of the AI. So let me give you an example. So first of all, market research and analysis. So instead of, spending weeks manually analyzing competitive intelligence or customer feedback, you can use engineered prompts to synthesize insights rapidly. So for example, analyze these 15 customer interviews and identify the top 5 decision criteria for EHR selection, rank them by importance, provide supporting evidence from the transcripts, and give me specific recommendations for adjusting our positioning strategy based on these insights. A really detailed prompt, and you're asking it how to analyze a lot of input. I actually did this myself about a year ago when I was doing an analysis of some customer interviews for a client. So the first thing I did was I genericized and removed all names of company and all names of the people being interviewed, the organizations that they work for. So what went into the AI was anonymized. I do that for safety as a best practice. I then went through a series of prompts to create an incredibly useful research document that the clients really valued. They really appreciated the output of it. But it took a series of very detailed prompts and a very structured process to do that. But I reckon it saved me about 20 or 30 hours, compared to what would happen if I'd done it manually. So I probably spent 4 or 5 hours with the AI coming up with the report. But if I'd done it without the AI, it probably would have taken me 20 to 30 hours to do. Another example of where you might use it is with campaign strategy and planning. So this is where prompt engineering gets really exciting. So you could develop a multi-channel campaign with specific tactics. So try this. Here's an example. Design a 90-day ABM campaign targeting 20 health systems on our priority list. Include specific tactics for engaging different stakeholders in the buying committees, CIOs, CMIOs, and CFOs. Provide a budget allocation recommendations across channel and define success metrics for each campaign. So really specific, broken down prompt. What you'll want to do is to get yourself armed with input that's going to get more value out of that. So you might have created personas for those individuals. You'll need to provide the list of the 20 accounts with URLs and any information that you have. So the more that you provide as essentially as ammunition, intellectual ammunition to the AI, the better value, the better response that you're going to get out of it. Here's another example with sales enablement. So let's say your sales team needs constant support with objection handling. That's something that they're struggling with. And you're trying to train them you're trying to train the sales SDRs how to do better at it. So here's an example. Create a comprehensive objection handling guide for when prospects compare us to a named competitor. Include specific talking points, supporting evidence like case studies or ROI data, and follow-up questions that redirect the conversations to our core strengths. I mean, that's an incredibly valuable thing to an SDR. It's like they don't have to think about it. They can just refer to it. Maybe it's built into your CRM. Here's another example. This is a sales enablement example. Review our current lead management workflow from first touch to sales qualified lead. Identify the top 3 bottlenecks that are slowing conversions. Then recommend specific process improvements and technology solutions with realistic implementation timelines and resource requirements. So the key insight here is that each of these prompts follows that 5-layer framework. They provide role, they provide context, they specify clear objectives, they define the audience and the use case, and they set a format requirement for each success that establishes what good looks like, what the success criteria are. Before I wrap up, I want to actually give you some sort of next level tips on things to think about. So these are some ideas on once you've sort of got the hang of that 5-level framework, some other things that you can do so that you develop really great prompts. So one of the ideas here is called chain prompting. And this is particularly powerful with complex projects. So I described how we created this really detailed research report based on some customer interviews. This is an example of chain prompting. So instead of trying to solve everything in one massive prompt, break the task down into smaller prompts. So for example, with that customer research, you're not going to say, hey, here are 15 interviews with prospects. I would like you to create a research report, and it needs to have the following 3 or 4 outputs included in it. What you're going to get is going to be very, very generic. So you're going to want to break that down into a series of different prompts and have those mapped out so that each output builds on itself. It also means that you can check and improve the quality at each step in the chain. And so this is the other notion, which is the notion of iterative refinement. And this can really be your best friend if you get this right. So you might start with a broad prompt and narrow it down with follow-up prompts. So for example, now make this more focused on health systems with over 1,000 beds, or you can adjust the tone to be more consultative. Add specific examples for each recommendation. Those are these sort of iterations that you want, but you want to have these kind of thought through before you get into the discussion. You'll start to learn how to get the most out of the prompts that you're giving the AI. The next tip is called context loading. So this means front loading your prompts with relevant background information. So you might include recent wins or current challenges or market conditions or specific competitors, regulatory considerations. And so the more relevant the context you provide up front, the more targeted and useful your outputs become. So for example, in creating this script today, I provided a really specific prompt, but I've created a couple of personas of folks like yourself, healthcare technology marketers. And so I fed that into that. You might also, so in addition to personas, you might put in market information. You might put in upload a research report. There are all kinds of different things that you want to upload as part of, your process here so that the prompt has something to sink its teeth into. The last tip is called output formatting. And this is where you get specific about how you want the information presented. So you don't just ask for recommendations or request frameworks or templates or something like that. You ask for different versions that are optimized for different audiences. So executive versus practitioners, internal teams versus external teams. You might also want to develop some quality control prompts as follow-up. So after getting your initial output, ask it things like, review this strategy and identify potential blind spots or risks I should consider. Another quality control is, how can I optimize this prompt to be so that it is optimized for the answer engines like AI overviews? I actually created a custom GPT called an EEAT analyzer. And so when we produce a piece of content, we run it through that afterwards to say, how can we optimize this so that the answer engines will select this over other pieces of content? Just to wrap up, I want to close with some common mistakes that happen with prompt engineering. So first mistake is, don't be vague, right? So you've got to be really clear in articulating what success looks like. Second error is not providing enough context for your specific situation. So go the extra effort in loading in other information that's going to help the AI get really detailed and really specific in its answer. The third is just thinking about the AI as an alternative to Google. It's clearly not that. It's far more capable in what it can do. And then the fourth is not iterating. So again, when you get the output, iterate on that output. I've created a blog post that summarizes this. It's a very simple how-to that you can link to. You'll find a link to it in the show notes. I hope you found this helpful. I actually learned quite a lot by going through the process of creating this. I'm sort of self-taught in prompt engineering, but I'd never really heard of the 5-layer framework. And I actually find it really useful context. And so I'm hopeful that it's going to improve the prompts that I develop. So with that, I want to thank you for listening. And just one last thing, which is, if you like this and found it useful, if you're watching on YouTube, give it a thumbs up. If you've listening on your, whatever your favorite podcast engine is, a podcast application, do me a favor, give me a positive rating on, because it really matters. It really is going to help people find these podcasts. By the way, if you think of somebody who might like this podcast, why don't you go ahead and forward it to them? I'd be really grateful to you if you would. So with that, I want to thank you for listening, and I bid you farewell.